Crackdown 3 has had a pretty storied development. From an early reveal, the inclusion of Terry Crews, and delay after delay. It's finally here and we get to take a crack at it and some insane action-oriented sandboxing. But was all of it worth the wait? Crackdown is an open-world sandbox in the same vein as GTA or Saints Row, but steers clear of the realism and goes straight for comic book style action and destruction. On paper, this sounds like a lot of fun, and something most people would be salivating to get a crack at. Sadly, in practice, it's not all that exciting. While going anywhere and being able to complete the game in any order is always a blast, hey, who doesn't love choice? Sadly, it's distilled from going from one task to the other. And a lot of these tasks are just copy and pasted with varying degrees of difficulty. I love a good checklist, 900 plus Kurok seeds, hello, but you still want some variance. At least the shooting is fun, and there's some neat weapons to use, as well as the progression of your various powers. If single player isn't your thing, there's also a multiplayer mode, called Wrecking Zone. You head out into an arena and wreck stuff, right? Wrong. It's actually an arena shooter where the environment falls apart. I also believe this is some of the first experiments with cloud computing. If that's true, it makes sense then that this mode actually looks better than the single player. The arena itself is pretty large, and you fight a lot of vertical battles. Literally. It almost seems the enemy is above or below you. While the environment does fall apart, it's so congested that it gets in the way a little. Almost like the devs were like, let's put all the things in here for people to wreck. The environment falls apart, but it seems to do so randomly. When trying to escape from an enemy, some of the things you can break through, others you cannot. So in some cases, you end up dashing smack into a wall and end up being blown away. Others you cruise through a wall with no problem at all and can get away. Of course, this is assuming you can see the opponent. The camera control is so infuriating that it really takes away from all the shooty action. The controls in Crackdown 3 can be infuriating. You'll be pressing, holding, flicking, moving, pulling your way through some insane action, so it's easy to forget what does what. Throwing a grenade just doesn't work well at all. In fact, throwing anything is really floaty, as is the platforming. I love scaling the tallest structures I can find, but the camera never cooperated. Not to mention they have a lock-on for easily targeting enemies, but it never seems to lock onto the target you want it to, especially if there's waves of enemies. This is all exacerbated in Wrecking Zone. Not as many enemies, so easier to lock on, sure, but the camera was all over the place, and in scenarios where I had to run, I found myself running into walls that wouldn't wreck or the electrified no-go zones. For a title that was not only delayed, but is also running on some of the most powerful hardware out there, it looks kind of like an up-res 360 game. I'm not sure if this is a design choice. I understand this is a comic book inspired type of game where everything is over the top, but I've seen better looking games on the Switch. I question if this is in fact a design choice, because the cutscenes are essentially just animated comic panels. If that's the case, fine. I just think with the system pushing teraflops, there could be a better blend of comic book and pseudo-realism. Other franchises have done great jobs of this, and with film media so dependent on comic books these days, you'd think in a video game they'd try to do a better job. It feels kind of lazy, especially given all the extra development time. The city feels bland and for the most part uninhabited. You can go for a while before a car comes along, although climbing and jumping to some of the insane heights is quite fun. Gotta get all the orbs. In Crackdown, you are an agent from the agency, taking down evil corporate entities and executives in the most over-the-top and violent ways possible. Even though it's fairly standard, it's also very poignant in today's political climate, and a lot of fun to go through. The cast of antagonists really work well against Terry Crews, not only in his bravado, but in the universe as a whole. The characters in this story are really the gem of the single player. The gameplay may be a little boring, but the cartoony villains against a superhero like Terry Crews is just so fun. It's almost a shame to have to take them out. Set in a sci-fi future and all taking place in a giant city, you and you alone, but with the help of crazy weapons and powers, have been tasked with taking down the corporate overlords. Of course, this comes on the heels of you being vaporized in the opening cutscene. So right off the bat, you're asked to suspend realism, and it works quite well in this universe. So the final verdict for Crackdown 3. The gameplay, task-oriented, frantic, over the top, but the multiplayer is forgettable. It is beautiful though. I gave it a 7.5. For the controls, cumbersome, and the camera is infuriating. I gave them a 6.5. For the presentation, it looks decidedly last gen. The city's kind of bland and the cutscenes are boring, so I gave it a 7.5. The story is a fun sci-fi romp, comic book inspired. It's simple but engaging, and I really love the characters. I gave it an 8.5. That means the total for Crackdown 3 on the Xbox One is a total of 7.5.